Our story begins aboard a space station, where two Jedi Knights, Obi-Wan Kenobi and his mentor Mace Windu, are guarding a shipment of fusion portables on behalf of the Republic. Their otherwise uneventful mission is suddenly disrupted by the appearance of a courier who notices the Jedi's laser swords and petitions them for help. He tells them that he's from the nearby planet Aquilai, and that his world has been blockaded by the Trade Federation in an attempt to extort control of its chrome factories. Their communications have been disrupted for months, and so far he's been the only courier who's been able to slip past the Trade Federation's armada. He begs the Jedi to help him rescue the Queen before she's forced to sign over control of the planet. Being Jedi, of course they accept. Having something better to do than guard fusion portables doesn't hurt either. The courier's shuttle, which he used to sneak past the blockade, is docked on the station, but before they can reach it, he's killed by someone wielding a red laser sword, a masked Sith Knight. The Sith battles Obi-Wan and Mace through the corridors of the space station and manages to injure the older Jedi. Obi-Wan, being young and reckless, attempts to fight the Sith on his own, hopefully giving Mace a chance to escape back to the Republic hangar. It's clear that Obi-Wan is no match for the Sith's power alone, so he flees to the courier's shuttle in the nick of time and blasts off into space towards Aquilai. When he gets there, he comes face to face with the blockade of the Trade Federation's saucer-shaped Star Destroyers. And while these vessels are mostly crewed by droids, their masters, the venal, capitalistic Shatnerians, are shriveled, shrunken alien creatures. Alerted by their droids to the return of the ship that slipped past the blockade, the Shatnerians order the vessel to be shot down, and it careens towards the planet's surface. Infuriated, the Shatnerian Viceroy contacts the Sith Knight who confronted Obi-Wan and Mace aboard the space station. He chastises the Dark Warrior for failing to stop the vessel that made it past the blockade and boasts that he managed to do the Sith's job for him. When the Viceroy warns the Knight that one more mistake like this will end their partnership, he begins to gasp and choke as the Sith reminds him that their partnership ends when his master deems it so, and the mistake was the Federation letting a ship pass the blockade in the first place. The Sith disconnects and the Shatnerian Viceroy lashes out, telling the droids to prepare his shuttle to the surface so he can enjoy the spoils of his imminent victory. Down on the planet, Obi-Wan crashes the courier's shuttle into the wilds of Aquilai, but is rescued from the wreck of the ship by an unlikely ally, a 10-year-old boy named Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan doesn't have time to thank him though, because the crash also draws the attention of a battle droid patrol. Revealing himself to be a Jedi Knight, Obi-Wan makes short work of the droids and returns the favor by saving Anakin's life. Once the boy is safe, Anakin starts digging through the wreck for usable parts, which prompts some questions from Obi-Wan. Anakin tells him that he's an orphan. His family was killed when the Trade Federation arrived, but now he's joined with the planetary resistance and came to salvage the wreck when they saw his ship crashing. Obi-Wan questions what sort of resistance would send a young boy out into a dangerous situation alone, and asks if he can meet its leaders. At the very least, maybe they can help him reach the planet's capital. Anakin eagerly leads Obi-Wan through the jungle, guiding him past the traps set up by the Resistance around their base in an abandoned temple. Once they reach the makeshift hideout, Obi-Wan realizes that this Resistance is nothing more than a bunch of young boys, war orphans like Anakin, and none of them are older than 15 or 16 years old. The group's leader, Owen, is annoyed by Anakin's pestering about Obi-Wan's heroism, but he eventually lets the Jedi in on his gang's plan. They've managed to get a hold of an old speeder and have been modifying it into a makeshift tank using scavenged parts. They've located a Trade Federation landing site and are going to attack it to avenge their families. Kenobi cautions them against this. They're just kids, though he's not much older than they are, and they're going to get themselves killed. When he tells them to go home, they remind him they don't have one anymore. So, still a little shaken from the crash, Obi-Wan stays with the group for a meal and some rest, regaling the boys with a story of one of his Jedi adventures. The boys hang on his every word, so Obi-Wan has to catch himself and try to downplay his heroics to keep them from getting any ideas. In the early hours of the morning, Obi-Wan tries to sabotage the group's speeder before sneaking off to the capital, but the noise wakes Anakin, who was asleep in the back of the vehicle because he feels like the other boys don't really want him around. Anakin is worried for the safety of his new brothers and shows Obi-Wan how to disable the makeshift tank. After all, if one of the greatest warriors in the universe thinks they're going to fail, then that must be true, and he doesn't want his friends to get hurt. Obi-Wan is touched by Anakin's praise and thanks him for his help before disappearing into the forest. As Kenobi trudges through the jungle, he becomes suspicious of movement and sounds all around him. After a tense moment, one by one, the boys reveal themselves to have been following him. They pledge themselves to him as Padawans and ask him to help them drive the Trade Federation from their home. Obi-Wan tries to argue with them, but they chatter insistently and excitedly, drawing another sound from the jungle. This one isn't more rebel boys though, it's an immense, hungry creature. Obi-Wan tries to fend the beast off by himself, but the boys have laid traps throughout the area around their hideout, and only together are they able to defeat the monster. Reluctantly, Obi-Wan accepts that this disheveled group of rebel children may actually be cunning enough to help him, and at the very least, he now owes them his protection. Together, the group is able to reach the capital city of Aquilai, and the boys use their knowledge of the backstreets to sneak past the battle droids and distract them while Obi-Wan rescues the Queen as she's being taken from the palace. A queen that the Jedi is exasperated to discover is also only 14 years old. The Queen is surprised to see that the Republic only sent a single Jedi to help her planet, but Obi-Wan tells her that the courier she sent was killed shortly after meeting him, and that another Jedi has gone to the Republic capital to report what's happening. The feisty girl says that that's not good enough, and orders Obi-Wan to help her escape the planet so she can bring her plight to the Republic directly. The slightly older Jedi humors the headstrong young queen and asks her how she plans on getting past the blockade. She admits that she doesn't really know, but when the boys return with some stolen clothes for the queen to disguise herself with, they offer a suggestion: the Trade Federation landing zone they were going to attack. If they can steal a Federation ship, they could probably bypass the blockade with ease. It's a dangerous plan, but so is staying on Aquilai and hoping the Republic comes to save them. After making their way back to the boys' camp, Queen Breha changes into some less suspicious clothes, while Anakin and Owen help Obi-Wan repair the sabotaged vehicle. And moving the speeder to the edge of the Trade Federation's landing zone, they put the vehicle in gear, race around to the other side of the clearing, and the droids guarding the ship move to investigate. Suddenly, the speeder explodes, giving Obi-Wan, the boys, and Breha a chance to board the Trade Federation ship and leave the planet's surface. As the stolen vessel approaches the blockade, it's hailed by a patrol craft. Obi-Wan tries to bluff his way past, even attempting a Jedi mind trick, but his power is useless against the Federation's robotic pilot, and he's forced to make a break for it. As the blockade fires on the stolen ship, Obi-Wan yells for the boys to man the gun turrets, but despite their earlier bravado, they've never actually been in a battle before and don't know what to do. The Jedi abandons the cockpit to try and whip the kids into shape, leaving the controls unattended, until Anakin hops into the pilot seat to keep the ship moving. Flak from the Trade Federation fighters explodes all around them as Obi-Wan shouts half-understood orders at the boys, and Anakin desperately tries to keep the ship in one piece. The vessel takes damage, and the incessant beeping of the ship's onboard astromech is added to the chaos as it tries desperately to put out fires and repair what damage it can. But against all odds, the group is able to come together as a unit. With Obi-Wan's direction and Anakin's piloting, the shuttle clears the blockade and jumps safely into hyperspace. Once in transit, the boys reprogram the ship's astromech droid, R2-D2, to help them assess the damage. The hyperdrive generator is leaking fuel, so the only way to make it to the Republic capital would be to make a pit stop on nearby Tatooine for replacement parts. Once they've landed on the desert planet, Obi-Wan decides they should keep a low profile, so he orders the boys to keep the Queen safe on the ship while he takes Owen, Anakin, and R2 into town to help them find the parts they'll need. And with a sandstorm brewing on the horizon, they'll have to hurry. Finding a junk dealer on the outskirts of town, Owen tells Anakin not to touch anything before heading inside. That doesn't last long, as Anakin is fascinated by all the different parts available in the shop, while Owen gets distracted flirting with the junk dealer's clerk, Beru, leaving Obi-Wan to haggle by himself. The Jedi tries to throw his weight around, making sure the alien shop owner can see his lightsaber, and attempts another mind trick, but the dealer just scoffs at him. The Republic has no power out here, and its enforcers have no control over his mind. If they don't have any money to buy the parts, they're out of luck. Frustrated, Obi-Wan collects his companions, catching Owen in the middle of trying to impress Beru by spilling the beans about his super important secret mission for the Republic. When the group leaves the shop, the junk dealer asks his clerk what exactly the boy was talking about, and what he was doing with a Jedi, revealing that he managed to steal the lightsaber right off of Obi-Wan's belt. As the sandstorm picks up, Obi-Wan lectures Owen about keeping his mouth shut. He doesn't know who could be listening. Owen says it's not a big deal, nobody out here even knows who they are. But his confidence evaporates when Obi-Wan tells him that Tatooine is under the control of gangs like the Hutts, vicious killers who would, in a best-case scenario, sell the Queen right back to the Trade Federation if they knew she was here. Owen asks why the Jedi didn't tell him this before they landed, and Obi-Wan says it's not like they had much of a choice, it was either here or nowhere. It's clear that Obi-Wan hasn't been thinking ahead and is trying to retain his position of authority, and an awkward pause in the argument gives Obi-Wan time to notice that R2 and Anakin are gone, and when he turns back, Owen is gone too. He calls out for them, but he can barely even see beyond his own hands in the sandstorm, and when he reaches for his lightsaber, even it's missing. Defenseless, gangster thugs rush him from the sandstorm, and while he puts up a valiant fight, he's eventually overcome and knocked out. The sandstorm rages back at the ship too, with more alien gangsters emerging from the dust cloud. They pry open the landing hatch of the ship, and the Queen and the other boys are dragged out, screaming inaudibly over the wind of the storm. When he comes to, Obi-Wan finds himself brought before a local crime lord named Montross, who's a rival of Jabba the Hutt. Montross tells Obi-Wan that he's heard a Jedi was trying to intimidate one of his junk dealers, and he wanted to see for himself, but he's not impressed. Obi-Wan assures Montross that he is a Jedi, and if the crime lord doesn't let him go, he'll find out just how impressive he can be. Montross scoffs and reveals that he's captured all of Obi-Wan's companions. He says that the Trade Federation would pay handsomely to get their missing queen back, and the boys seem to be able-bodied workers as well. But he's willing to return them to the Jedi's custody in exchange for a favor. Obi-Wan is skeptical, but asks what the favor is. Montross tells him there's a big speeder race coming up, and that Jabba the Hutt had one of his goons take out Montross's champion racer. He's heard stories about Jedi reflexes and demands that Obi-Wan race for him. If he wins, the prisoners go free, and they can use their share of the winnings to buy the parts they need for their ship. Obi-Wan reluctantly accepts the deal, but when Montross shows him the vehicle, it's clear that it's in poor shape, and he only has until dawn to get the thing up and running again. Showing more interest in victory than cruelty, Montross allows R2, the boys, and the Queen to help Obi-Wan fix the speeder using the junk dealer's parts, the cost of which will, of course, be subtracted from their winnings, if they win. Owen keeps getting distracted talking to Beru, but Anakin notices Obi-Wan's purloined lightsaber stashed away behind the counter. Just as he grabs it, the junk dealer returns and angrily tells him to keep his hands where he can see them, though Anakin manages to stash the lightsaber in a toolbox before he notices. Owen apologizes for the kid's behavior and sends him back out to the junkyard. Before Anakin can return Obi-Wan's weapon to him, though, it becomes clear that something's wrong. The Jedi seems distant and inattentive, so Breya takes him aside and he reveals a nasty wound that he suffered when being taken captive and has been keeping hidden to appear strong for the rest of the group. As she dresses his injury, the young Queen begins to realize she's developing a crush on the dashing older Jedi. And while Obi-Wan definitely feels conflicted about the girl's attention, his larger concern is his physical condition. It's becoming rapidly clear that he'll be in no position to race even if the speeder is repaired, so he'll need to find someone to replace him. Breya spills the beans despite Obi-Wan wanting to maintain his image as an invulnerable Jedi Knight, and while the boys are shocked and disappointed that they won't get to see him race, they're also excited to impress him, with several of the older boys boasting that they can easily win. But Obi-Wan chooses Anakin. He noticed the boys' piloting skills during the blockade run, and he believes that Anakin has an innate connection to the Force that would make him an ideal replacement. The other boys argue, with Owen especially trying to keep Anakin from doing something this dangerous, but Obi-Wan is still a Jedi Knight, so they obey him and prepare Anakin as best they can while they finish the rest of the repairs for the race. When their busted speeder pulls up to the starting line near the entrance to Beggar's Canyon, the situation looks pretty grim. The other competitors are experienced racers and top-of-the-line speeders, while Obi-Wan's letting everything ride on a 10-year-old in a barely functional metal death trap. So, while the Jedi gives the boy some parting words of wisdom about trusting the Force, the others just wish him good luck and head to the stands. As the race begins, Anakin struggles to even get the speeder moving, and Owen stares daggers at Obi-Wan, but inevitably, Anakin's speeder roars to life and he races through the canyon, using his scrappy cunning and what to all outside observers would seem like blind, dumb luck to barely scrape by with a victory. The boys are ecstatic, Obi-Wan and Breya are relieved, but Owen is just frustrated. So while the other boys return to the ship with the new parts, Owen stays behind to have a private talk with Obi-Wan and Anakin. He calls out Obi-Wan for agreeing to the Crime Lord's challenge despite being injured and putting everyone's life in danger because he wanted to seem like a big, powerful Jedi. Obi-Wan defends himself. They wouldn't even be in this situation if Owen hadn't been so preoccupied with trying to impress a girl, and besides, the Force was with them. They won because they were destined to, and no other outcome was possible. Owen calls bullshit on that Jedi stuff, saying that it almost got all of them enslaved. He tells Obi-Wan that if there's more like that in store for them by following him, then he's gonna stay on Tatooine. Owen tries to get Anakin to stay too, saying that Obi-Wan used him to fix his own mistake. But Anakin feels differently. He He says that Owen never treated him like a real part of the group, but Obi-Wan trusted him and believed in him. Owen tries to say that he did believe in Anakin. The odds against him winning were so terrible that the meager bet Owen was able to place on him paid back 1,000-fold, and now he has enough money to start an entirely new life. As he turns to leave, Anakin just says that that's the difference between Owen and the Jedi. Obi-Wan's trying to help people, but Owen's just looking out for himself. As Obi-Wan and Anakin complete their trek back to the ship through the desert, the Jedi senses something and sees a shimmering shape on the horizon. At first it seems like a mirage, but then it becomes all too real as the speeder-mounted Sith Knight crests the ridge of a dune and attacks. Obi-Wan reaches for his lightsaber, but then realizes he never got it back after it was stolen from him. Anakin realizes what's happening too and runs back aboard the ship where the others are finishing the repairs with R2. He alerts them to the fight, and Breya assertively leads the boys in getting the ship started as Anakin races to the toolbox, rummaging through it until he finds the lightsaber he stashed there. Returning to the ship's ramp, Anakin tosses the weapon to Obi-Wan, who ignites it, and finally has a chance to fight back against his attacker. The ship's engines flare to life as the battle begins, kicking up sand and dust all around the combatants. The Sith is caught off guard, but Obi-Wan's experienced this before, and this time he's ready. Deftly navigating the miniature sandstorm, Obi-Wan leaps aboard the landing ramp of the ship as it takes off, and although his lingering injury prevents him from beating the Dark Warrior, he manages to escape unscathed once again. With everyone safe, Obi-Wan explains that Owen decided to stay behind, and tells the other boys that if they want, he can alter course to the city so they can join him. But the boys just saw a Jedi warrior fighting in a real-life lightsaber battle. They're disappointed that Owen isn't coming with them, but their loyalty to the Jedi and to their queen has only gotten stronger. The stolen vessel then makes its way to the Republic capital of Ofuchi, and when the group lands, Obi-Wan reunites with Mace Windu as Breya meets with Aquilai Senator Palpatine and the Republic President Valorum. Valorum is initially resistant to the idea of Breya pleading her case directly to the Senate. After all, there are proper procedures for this sort of thing, and she can't just circumvent the Republic's bureaucracy because she wants her problems fixed before everyone else's. Palpatine asks Obi-Wan suggestively if there's nothing he can do to help change Valorum's mind. So Obi-Wan subtly convinces Valorum that Breya addressing the Senate as soon as possible would actually be a very good idea. Or at least that's what seems to happen. Someone certainly gets Valorum to change his mind, but Obi-Wan's not so good at that yet, is he? Regardless, an emergency session of the Senate is called, and Breya demands the Republic take action to deliver her planet from the hands of the Trade Federation. Palpatine goes even further and calls for Valorum's impeachment, accusing him of either being unable or unwilling to bypass the bureaucracy that's preventing worlds like Aquilai from getting the help they need, and even intimating that Valorum might be stalling because he's been bought off by the Trade Federation's money. Palpatine also cautions that if Valorum isn't strong enough to deal with the Trade Federation, how could he possibly protect the Republic from the looming threat of the Confederacy of Independent Systems? So while Palpatine and Breya try to stir the Senate into action, Obi-Wan has a chance to catch up with Mace and tells his mentor about the discovery of Anakin and the boy's burgeoning power in the Force. They speculate that such an innate connection could mean that Anakin is the chosen one spoken of in an ancient prophecy, and that the appearance of a Sith Knight may be more than a coincidence. Mace suggests that Obi-Wan take the boy to Yoda for training, but Obi-Wan brushes him off. He started to form a rapport with the boy, and after leading this ragtag group of misfits, he feels that he's ready to take on an apprentice of his own. Regardless of the boy's future, Mace offers to help Obi-Wan complete his mission. He regrets having to retreat on the station, and feels that if the Sith Knight managed to track the Queen to Tatooine, it's likely that he'll remain close behind. Just then, Palpatine strides out of the Senate chamber with Queen Breya storming behind him. Although she's frustrated with the Republic's refusal to send aid to her planet, the incident has caused enough controversy for Valorum to be ousted from office, with a snap election being called to determine the next Republic president. So, with no additional help for the foreseeable future, Breya decides to return home and solve the problem herself. As Mace preps the stolen ship for takeoff, Breya and Obi-Wan brief the boys on the plan. The Jedi and the Queen will head down to the surface to retake the palace from the Shatnerian Viceroy, while the boys will use the stolen shuttle to sneak aboard the droid control ship and shut down their army. Easy, right? Back on Aquilai, the Federation Viceroy is enjoying his spoils in the throne room, eagerly devouring the finest food in the palace as the Queen's Golden Protocol droid uselessly lectures him about using the incorrect utensils, if he bothers to use them at all. The feast is interrupted by the arrival of the Sith Knight, who tells the Viceroy that the Queen is returning to her home and that she's coming for his head. The Shatnerian is worried until he learns that she's coming without the Republic's aid, and he returns to his gluttony, telling the Sith to deal with the situation in whatever way he deems fit. Coming out of hyperspace well beyond the blockade, the gang sets their plan into motion, shutting off the ship's systems and letting it drift towards the blockade as the Queen and the Jedi climb into the escape pod. The pod launches, but like its stolen mothership, its systems remain deactivated as the lifeboat whirls through darkness towards the planet. Aboard one of the Federation Star Destroyers, a droid picks up the powered-down hunks of metal on its scopes and determines that the larger vessel must have malfunctioned. They tow the stolen ship into an immense hangar bay and allow the seemingly defunct escape pod to pass unharmed. As the pod enters the planet's atmosphere, its occupants restart its systems and its engines flare to life, lowering it gently to the surface. Back in the hangar, the boys lie in wait inside their vessel, and when the droids force their way in, the kids charge, bottlenecking the security robots and stealing their weapons to raid the hangar. After blasting the other security droids, the boys realize they're on the wrong ship, because the control vessel is visible outside in space. But then they notice a squadron of starfighters parked in the bay, and the boys realize what they have to do. The fighters are built for two, with an astromech socket alongside the traditional pilot seat, and after breaking off the astro droid's restraining bolts, the robots are more than happy to help the boys with whatever it is they're doing. So, with R2 joining Anakin in his starfighter, the group blasts off out of the hangar towards the control ship. Meanwhile, down on the planet, the Jedi and the Queen have to fight their way through the battle droids guarding the palace, making progress towards the throne room until they're cut off by the sudden appearance of the Sith Knight, who's ready for his rematch against the two Jedi. The battle begins above the planet as well, and the rebel boys have the time of their lives flying in combat against the droid pilots of the Trade Federation, whose robotic brains are confused by their erratic flying style. All seem to be going well, until the Federation reasserts control of the astromechs to stall out the fighters, leaving only Anakin and the fully reprogrammed R2-D2 still able to fly. Things are also starting to go poorly in the palace, as the Jedi have their hands full trying to keep the Sith away from the Queen, who keeps trying to rush the throne room rather than staying somewhere safe. When she finally does manage to break away, she's met by a group of battle droids and a shield that makes access to the throne room impossible. Over the din of combat, Breya shouts to the Jedi to head to the generator room and disable the shield, but it's clear that she won't be able to hold out against the droids by herself. So Obi-Wan breaks away to save her, telling Mace to deal with the generator while he helps Breya fend off the droids. Mace and the Sith Knight then fight their way to the generator room as more and more droids pour in around the throne room, eventually overwhelming the Queen and her Jedi protector. Alone, Mace is no match for the Sith warrior, and he leaps up to a high platform in the generator room to put some distance between himself and his enemy. The Sith taunts him. Mace is old and his powers are weak. His death is inevitable. Mace agrees and drives his lightsaber right into the generator. An explosion then rocks the palace as droids surround Obi-Wan and the Queen. The lights go out, ending the lockdown and lowering the shield, but as the palace is bathed in the red glow of emergency lamps, Obi-Wan realizes what's happened and that it's his fault. The situation in space is dire as well. With the boys' ships inoperable, the enemy starfighters begin their attack run to eliminate their easy prey. All alone, Anakin is scared, but rather than his fear paralyzing him, it turns to anger, and the anger gives him the push he needs to slam the throttle of the ship and blast right through the squadron of incoming fighters as R2 screams in the socket behind him. Anakin's maneuver is enough to draw the enemy fighters away from the defenseless rebel boys, and with R2's help, he makes a suicidal run into the hangar bay of the droid control ship. Programmed to destroy their foes at all costs, the droid pilots follow him, blasting heedlessly in a vain attempt to hit the deranged child starfighter and destroying their own vessel from within. The droid starfighters, still out in space, go spiraling madly through the void as they lose the ability to steer their craft, and the larger droid-controlled Star Destroyers collide with each other as their pilots go offline. In the palace, the droids surrounding Obi-Wan and Breya fall silent as well, not firing at them, not doing anything. So Obi-Wan cautiously pushes one over and then looks back at Breya. Anakin did it. Without his droid bodyguards, the sickly Trade Federation Viceroy is easily subdued by Breya and Obi-Wan, and the Queen's Golden Protocol droid is ecstatic at her return. Obi-Wan, however, isn't as pleased. He finds Mace's charred body in the generator room, but sees no trace of the Sith Knight he was fighting. The dour mood is continued at Mace's funeral. Among those visiting Aquilai to pay their respects is Yoda, who expresses concern to Obi-Wan about his readiness to take on an apprentice and worry about the Sith's involvement in the situation. Nevertheless, the problem seems to have been solved for now, so the heroes of Aquilai are honored with a massive celebration, and Anakin Skywalker is set to begin an eventful career as a Jedi Knight. To be continued in Episode 2.